We are lighting the candle, a world that works. And I'm Bill Carell. And if I sound a little high today, it's because I am. I'm at 5,420 feet elevation in Denver, Colorado, right at the moment. And yeah, that is a Rocky Mountain high, no doubt about it. So I'm here with three of my closest amigos. We've got Jan Jeremias, we've got Ken Caputo, and also Lisa Sheehan. And we've been doing this now for coming up on, I think, 3 years. We're up over 140 some episodes, and we do this every single week or whenever we can for the express purpose of generating empowerment in our lives. And we're pretty sure if it's working for us, it's going to work for you too. So, kind of with that said, uh, we're working on altering our focus or foci, all of those, and trying to see how wide we can go in terms of creating maybe some life hacks for you, our listeners. And quite frankly, every time we talk about pretty much anything, three out of the four of us is usually learning a little something from the person who's speaking or has something really nice to come back with. So again, you have a life, you've got stops in your life, you've got places where you could use a little bit of pick me up, and we're hoping that we can give you some life tools to help along the way. With that said, anybody have something they'd like to kick off with this morning? Morning for me, afternoon for you.
Learn anything on your vacation, Ken?
Learn anything on vacation? Actually, really just, I guess, not so much learning as, it's always a good reminder of the value of rest and recovery and letting that be intentional so that, it's not something that just happens. It's something that I find myself just, I'm just sitting there and taking in ocean air and sunlight and receiving it, so not just sitting in it, wondering if I'm on vacation or relaxing. I was recognizing the feeling of relaxation and imagining, just vitamin D soaking in, or just, almost like doing little silly thought experiments. So it's just a reminder of the value of being present, I guess.
A little mindfulness sandwich there, huh?
Yeah, and it's kind of, I guess, from a life hack perspective. If you think, I think a lot of people think mindfulness is something, that you have to work at, and it's not. Like, you don't really need to do that much. I mean, we'll even teach little workshops where there's kind of 4 entry circles, and it can just be as simple as just noticing that you're breathing, and immediately that just brings your awareness to what's going on, or noticing what you're hearing, or opening up and just looking around and just really seeing, so it's just, now you're being mindful, and yes, there are layers, and it can get super complex and sophisticated if you want it to, but it's unnecessary,
Yeah, personally, a couple of times this weekend, because with 70 some odd people in the room, when we were having meals together, it was a little bit hectic. And we had a range of children from age 2 to like age 14. And so I would just go out and sit, in the lobby all by myself. And then I would count down from my breaths, and I would listen for for the sounds coming from the room, and then try to picture who was laughing and giggling and speaking, and just a whole lot of love going on all at one time. And so I found that when I removed the visual, I could actually concentrate on the sounds and more or less pick up where they were in the room and who was speaking and who was giggling. My cousin Steve's got this booming, real deep voice, and then my aunt Claudia has a higher voice. And so I would pick out little snippets from here and there and just kind of smile, just enjoy breathing and listening.
That was my favorite when I took a mindfulness class and they told us to listen for the sounds because before that nobody had ever said that to use the sound as part of your practice um in meditation, short meditations. And I thought that was the best thing on the planet because, people, I can't meditate because there's a lawnmower outside, or I can't meditate because those birds are singing, and then you use it then.
Bring it along.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing way to concentrate to be in the moment because there's always a sound going on for the most part. You can't, and then if there's not, then you go back to the breath because there's a sound inside you then. But the farthest away sound is sometimes cool, and then you don't even notice, like, "Oh, I can hear the train whistle back there," or, anything silly, or the rain outside, you're concentrating just on the inside, and then you go to the outside, it's kinda cool, and then it brings you literally to the present moment.
My teacher would say focus is for function, peripheral is for peace. And, so listening to the further sound or noticing something on the edge of your peripheral vision, it just changes the whole way that your brain is functioning.
Mhm.
So, and that kind of softens, you hear Tai Chi, you'd hear the term soft eyes, was another one. So, yeah, it is pretty cool when you have those experiences.
I like the way I personally like get in touch with the sense of feeling. So, being on the beach and actually walking on the sand and feeling the sand and how your body weight gives in or how the water brushes across your feet. Or if you're sitting and you're meditating, is actually to feel your seat on whatever you're sitting and where your hands are resting on your legs or where they're resting or if they're touching each other, that whole aspect of touch and feel, which is that's like my direct path in
Mm.
to the present moment is actually through that physical sensation. Yes, I use sound and I might use vision, but I definitely include where I am in space. And it could be the feel of the breeze on your skin,
Mhm.
but it's that feeling versus sometimes hearing.
So we talk about the word interesting an awful lot, but what's interesting to me, I'm just noticing listening to you speak. A while ago, I can't put it at any particular time, but when I sat down to have a quiet time and to be present and to be mindful, before I really had any grounding in what that meant to me personally or how I would access that, the loudest thing that I heard was always the thoughts in my head,
Mm.
and it drowned everything else out. And so now I actually can sit down and clear that away, ask it to go sit at the side for a minute or two. I know you'll be there when I come back later. And then I can just start with the focusing on what's going on in the environment. And the breathing, the rhythmic breathing, and just kind of feeling myself sink into whatever I'm sitting in, and then allowing my body to just become part of that environment for a moment and disappear, kind of like being part of the background. And then what happens is the amplification of everything else that's going on. And it's just such a cool thing. It's like being at a concert or something and being able to really, get into it and appreciate, especially when the little kids are chirping. I absolutely love the sound of happy children.
When you're saying that, Bill, I think that's when I always tell my students, when you're sitting, and if you happen to be sitting and you're becoming mindful or you're meditating, whatever it is, that's the point at which my body, if I'm not comfortable, tends to talk to me
Yeah.
and speak really loud sometimes. If something hurts and I need to shift or just to get grounded. And as you sit for longer and longer, those things change. So you become very mindful about where you are and how you feel, which is so important because that's where we really should be navigating from is that, where we are, that authenticity.
Yeah, that's a special word. Authenticity means stripping away all that is not you, allowing it to disappear and go away so that all you're left with is nothing. And from nothing, that's how you receive the world. I love it. When you're nervous, that's not authenticity. When you're happy, that might be. But when you're judging and concerned about what you look like, no authenticity present at all. And I always, get out of that mindset by knowing there's enough other people in the room judging me right now. I don't have to as well. One of the natural states for human beings.
That's why I love the
And I think
statement.
for me, yeah. Go ahead, Lisa.
What other people think of you is none of your business. I always like that simple point of
I haven't
that.
heard that before, but that sounds like enlightened thinking to me.
Exactly.
Their opinion is overrated, isn't it?
I was thinking when you were saying the thoughts in your head too, because I have two parts of my personality. I call them the countess and the songstress. So when I'm not even paying attention, they're either counting or singing a song. And I'm not even, and all of a sudden I'll be walking. I'll go, "Oh, hello, countess. How are you today?"
And what happens when you do that?
Oh, that actually she usually keeps going, but I'll try to change the thought, and it's weird, but it brings me into the present moment actually too. It's another thing that makes me aware of where I am and where she is in her count because she doesn't count normally either.
You pick her up in the middle of a long string.
Yes, like she'll go 115, 20, 115, 22.
It sounds like my grandson's about 3 years ago. That's how they counted normally.
But part of me, so I just say
Yeah.
hello. I'm not even sure where that
Yeah.
comes from. I'm sure it's some sort of childhood thing. I'm thinking. I don't even know when I first heard her. How long ago it was.
So why be mindful? What's in it for me?
Present moment is all we have to actually experience. So mindfulness brings you to the present moment, and that's the best you can do for your life. Actually, it's like live it to the fullest in that moment. That's
You're talking about counting and singing. A lot of people just hum.
I have a
But
book on humming, how good it is for you, and the different benefits of it. I never finished the book, but
so you've got more benefits coming.
exactly.
That's actually an interesting question, Bill. Why be mindful? It's I think as you ask that, I let go of the assumption that it's valuable to be mindful. So I think there's a lot of context in your life. Sometimes you can be in a place where you you want to be a little removed. You don't want to be mindful. Maybe you're so deep in suffering that self-awareness or awareness of even what's going on around you is not something you feel. I think it's why for me personally, I've studied Stoicism almost as like a balancing place to some of the more Eastern traditions, where it's there. And it's not that you're removing yourself, but you're accepting the difficulties of a situation and choosing to be someone of integrity and virtue and grace and all those kind of things. But you maybe don't want to be paying that close attention. I don't know. It's an interesting question, and how often is it that people are just they're not sure there is a compelling why. So it makes sense if you're already there. Why wouldn't I eat healthier, or why wouldn't I exercise, or why wouldn't I do breath work or whatever it is? But maybe they haven't connected to a why that gives them a reason to actually do those things.
I like that a lot. And I think what I like about it is you're introducing, the whole notion of choice.
Mhm.
Where in any moment, if you had the choice to continue paying attention to what you're paying attention to, or I think Jan, as you said earlier, if you wanted to choose, or Lisa, if you wanted to choose going another direction in this moment, like most people don't have a way to stop whatever's running, simply because they don't see it as a choice. They don't see it as a responsibility. They think that this is what's really going on in the world. And almost never is the little voice in your head have anything to do with really going on around you in the physical environment. It's almost always, from the past or from the future or something completely different. But the notion of being able to choose maybe a different narrative for right now, or to be open to the environment will give you a narrative that you can then maybe have a little fun with and play with by being present.
So I was wondering then, like, can't because I know you probably know Ryan Holiday, the Daily
Oh yeah.
Stoic.
Yep. I've
So,
read all of his books.
so I love how he has the coins with different
Hmm.
sayings on them, and I fell in love with Amor Fati or Fati or however you say it, but which is
Hmm.
love your fate. So I think that's kind of interesting when whatever, even if you're in a difficult moment, to like then bring yourself to it and see what is good about this kind of thing. What can I extract from it that I could actually maybe love a little? Because it does twist your brain a little into making it something better somehow. But I wonder what you think about it.
Yeah, I agree, and so I just flashed on this. When I was in college, I cut my toe running to catch a frisbee on a broken bottle, and
Ugh.
like gashed it pretty good. So I had to go and get it stitched up at the little clinic they have on campus. This is at UConn. And so I went in, and they're looking at it like, yep, this is going to take a few stitches. And they neglected to give me anesthesia. And
Oh,
it was just a miscommunication, and they started just sewing me up. And it was one of the most incredible, agonizing experience. It's like, imagine someone drawing sandpaper through raw skin. It was like really, really painful, plus sticking the needle through an
ah,
open wound. So the doctor finishes stitching me up, and he's looking at me, and I'm like pale and sweating and shaking at this death grip. And, and he looked at the nurse. He's like, did he get anesthesia? She's like, no, I didn't give him a local. I thought you were going to do that. And at that point, it was too late. And, and being less mindful, if there had been the opportunity to numb that pain so I could be more detached and less
mhm,
aware of what was happening, would have been incredibly beneficial, and probably would have made that process honestly even safer. I mean, I don't know how I managed to hold still, you know. So so then the flip side, years later, um I had a similar thing, and they had to give me a shot into a wound to stitch it, and he's like clamped down on my leg again. This is another foot thing, silly as that is. And he's like, look, this is really going to hurt. I've got to inject it right in. And he's holding my leg, and I said, all right, whenever you're ready. And I went into breath work, and I opened myself up to my whole body, the feeling of my whole body, the feeling of the area around me. And he gives me the shot, and he says, you didn't tense at all. He says, I am so used to having a clamp down. There's no response from your muscles when the pain signal hit you. He says, how did you do that? So I was just saying, well, I just went into a meditative state. So I'm actually arguing both sides
mm,
of the for and against with a similar circumstance. And I guess what it really comes down to, and this is stream of consciousness, I'm talking this out.
Yeah.
It's skillfulness. Like, so if you become skillful and you have an understanding of how to apply that skill, I think mindfulness can be very valuable. But if you hadn't had the opportunity or a good teacher to teach you how to be skillful, I think it could be a detriment. So much of it is where we're at, and whether we had someone. I was just gifted with the fact that I had a brilliant man share this knowledge with me. But if he hadn't taught me that, I would have had no idea. I would have had to deal with the second situation exactly like the first.
Yeah.
But I've been a different human, not because of me, but because of a wisdom tradition that was shared with me through a man who it had been shared with, you know? So
And now we're sharing it with
do
the
with that
world.
what you will.
To go back, first of all, what is it and why would you want to do it? I think sometimes that's hard for people. Like if you experience it, I think it is very experiential. So once you practice or you get even a glimpse of what that feels like to be in that present moment or more spacious in your thoughts or whatever, it's often even hard to describe to someone else what that feeling is like. And it's hard to articulate at times. But once you get it, you kind of go, okay, I get it. And then you want to do it again. Or most usually what happens with people is that they want to try to get there again. They want to try to recreate that same feeling they had. And when Ken was talking about his foot, the same thing happens with, I mean, I had a similar situation where I was going for a lot of tests, medical tests, and I would sit in the waiting room and I would whip out my essential oil. I would just sit there and deep breathe and count my breath and do all these different things to get myself in a space where, I was in a very anxious causing setting. And I was doing it to alleviate some of that anxiety as much as I could, knowing that that wasn't going to benefit me in any way because of, whatever I was going for, was going to raise my blood pressure or, and increase the cortisol and do all those things. And if I could limit that, maybe I could just navigate the whole situation just with more ease.
So how would you explain the difference between those two? Like you're being aware, you're in the present moment in both those situations, right? But in one, you're just almost fighting or not knowing what to do with the stimulus, and the other one, you are moving it away. So, yeah, how do you explain the difference between those 2 to other people, kinda?
Well, I can bring a little bit of light to that from 11 years of practice of going in twice a year and getting shot full of Novocaine all over my body for a biopsy. And I would say the first few times that I went in, I was very much waiting for, anticipating, and potentially reacting as I always had reacted to being shot, with a needle. And anymore, even they always talk about how sensitive your nose is when they give me a shot, in my nose. I've just learned how to allow it to just be present, and I don't wish it away. I've taken on, the notion that in order for me to test my skill or my ability or the toolkit, I have to go through these things. You actually, to see if a boat floats, you got to put it in water, right? And from a theoretical standpoint, if it works one time and it's not like living through and getting to the other side of the experience, what, as Ken was saying, it's more about allowing what's going to happen to take shape. And I don't tense anymore either. And they go, how do you do that? We probably get 30, 40 shots a day, and you're just so willing, to accept it. And I say, I've decided that this is something that's good for me.
Mhm.
So I actually look forward to it. I actually accept it. I embrace it and I invite it. And then if there is a sensation to it, then I just kind of notice what that is and take it on. So in your case, Ken, the toolkit can be very diverse over a number of years. And I think the important part of this is referring to it as a skill. Actually, at some point, it becomes an ability that's just part of you. And
Mhm.
it's not something where you have to go through mechanical steps any longer, like a thought process or something of that nature. It's more or less like, you know, Bruce Lee going, bring it, whatever it is. And that's a kind of a neat place to be where there's no fear of what's coming next. And that becomes like a normal thing as opposed to one that you expect to turn out badly.
And any skill through repetition and refinement, it reaches that place of no mind, would be the what we talk about in martial arts. But the other thing,
Yeah.
Lisa, it's interesting as you're talking about it, so that you got this focus is for function, peripheral is for peace. And,
Mm.
there's this Tibetan sky mind concept of, is your mind like the clouds blocking the sun, or is your mind like the sky that holds all the clouds? So that first one, it was intensely focusing on one thing: don't move. They're jamming a needle through my foot and it hurts, but don't move. So I like hyper focused on that, because that was the unconscious, you know, competence that came out of it. So later I'd become skillful in a series of things that allowed me to be consciously competent, but I didn't go through a checklist. I just activated the skill. And, and the only way to activate the skill is from years of Qigong breathing and meditation and Tai Chi and all that kind of stuff. So exactly to what Bill's saying, and I think that often, especially when I work with uh, content contributors, people that are, they have some kind of service or something they're doing, they make an assumption that people can do it or can learn to do it without really knowing where their starting point is or the context that their life has framed for them to be able to receive the information. So it's like, why don't they just listen? Or why don't they just make this change? Their life will be so much better. I know it will. It's like, well, you're looking at them through the lens of your own eyes instead of looking at yourself back at them, back at you through their eyes, So it's an interesting thing. So it's a cool question to contemplate. I don't know. There's really, I think the answers are unique as all of us.
Would you be interested in like a skills practice for people to go through to potentially be in a position where that becomes a natural act?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's
Back in the 90s, I think the training roles for this whole process were disappearing a headache in
Mm.
someone else. And so a series of questions. But first, the first question is always, are you willing for your headache to go away? Because without that, without that commitment that I am willing for my headache to disappear, there's no possibility because you're not going to be present while the exercise is going on. So it starts off with eyes closed, and breathing. So go ahead and breathe. And then now describe to me where the pain is in your head. And the questions go in a series. How big is it? Tell me what size it is. Is it the size of an apple? Is it the size of a grape? Is it somewhere in the middle? Size of a plum? Okay, great. And so if it were a color, what color would it be? And then now tell me um, how, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much is it giving you pain? So then you go back through the series of questions as it becomes smaller and smaller, and then suddenly disappears. And it is it's actually a medical process that's used by people where they have no painkillers to allow folks that have been hurt badly so that they can be able to have the pain tolerance go up in their body where they are not causing the pain by fighting it. And so the whole notion is that whatever you can presence will disappear. So that by giving it a color, by giving it a size, by giving it a shape, it really kind of doesn't matter what questions you ask, but you want the person to be focusing 100% on being present to what that is and being able to see it other than an undistinguished pain. And then after a while, they can do it for themselves. They don't even need to have anybody asking the questions. And then after a while, it's like, do I choose to have this pain and persist and resist it? Or do I choose to have it just wash over me and then be done? And it's a really powerful thing to have those tools in your kit and have the option to choose again.
It's interesting. I ran that through. It's just this thing I'm working on right now as far as learning, and that was I think that would resonate really well with people whose gateway to learning is cognitive. like it allows you to think about it, and what's interesting about that is a lot of Eastern practices are either one of the other two gateways, which is either emotional, feeling based, or embodied. Like,
Right.
So it's like, you have a headache, but feel your little pinky, feel the shape of your body, feel the breath. So like you physically tune in, and then that gives you a different reference base for the pain and the potential to dissolve it. Or you get in touch with, like, one of the things we used to say a lot is, you know, pain can be your friend. It's a teacher. It's what is it trying to tell you? What's your relationship to the pain? So
Yeah.
you're not trying to understand it. You're just recognizing it, as part of you being human. And sometimes being human sucks, that whole thing. So it's just kind of interesting how that one's very specifically, I think, would be very helpful to someone who is a cognitive learner first before they can connect in those other ways. Because someone like that, you tell them, "Well, feel your body," and they're like, "I don't want to feel my body. My head hurts." So you get this resistance. So that gives you a different gateway to enter into that process, which is cool. I like it.
The contract to be willing to give it away is key, because a skeptic won't tell you that they're not really in the contract, that they'll persist and they'll still have the headache. Although I've never seen anybody do, because you can draw this out for a half hour, and sooner or later their resistance breaks down and they finally just get it, and then suddenly their headache is gone. It's an amazing thing to watch or to participate in.
And I think the next step is actually, let's say you get headaches all the time, it's starting to look for what is triggering those headaches. So
Yep.
start to take it a step further to see if you can see a pattern. I mean, that's, for me, why when journaling gets to be really interesting. Every time I have this stressful situation, I get a headache before, or every time, every time I have an interaction with my boss, I get a headache. And then trying to create mechanisms or ways or skills to sort of adjust yourself to that situation, not adjust, but to alter the way you're thinking or the way you're feeling around that situation to see whether the headache then goes away or they no longer happen.
Sometimes it's as simple as just drinking an 8-ounce glass of water.
That's right. Yeah, sometimes, yeah. That was me yesterday. I just had headaches. I was like, got to drink more.
This is not a real difficult thing to do. Be kind to your body and drink 64 ounces of fluid a day, and maybe you won't have as many headaches. Who knows? Again, while you're talking, I really enjoy, the mind picture of somebody choosing to learn from their experience and allow pain to be in that learning part, as opposed to what you always avoid.
Right.
Yeah, I like the idea of being one with the obstacle, or what you're perceiving as an obstacle. So rather than fight against it, it's like, how do you find the rhythm within this, So, and it's how often in our lives are the greatest resistances, are our difficulty in accepting what is, and our focus on what was or could be or should be, so it's like, the game has rules, and that may make the game harder for you to play. But if you want to play the game, you got to figure out how to navigate within the rules, so but that can be difficult. And and if you're in a place, especially if you have influences around you that are telling you, getting you focused on how unfair it is, or the challenges you're facing, it can be very hard to find harmony.
Yeah, there's actually no lesson in it's unfair.
Yeah. It's funny. We used to, when we were doing really difficult exercises, sometimes at one teacher, he'd say, "Right now, you're feeling a sensation that some might call pain." And we would all laugh every time, you know. It was like, you know, and sometimes we joke and say, I'm absolutely calling it pain right now. But it kind of changed your relationship with it. Like it wasn't dismissing it, it wasn't telling you to suck it up. It was just pointing to your relationship to how you name that thing and how you relate to that thing. And, you know, John used to always say, just make friends with it. You know, just find the edges of it, dance with it a little bit. What's it telling you right now? It's trying to keep you safe, you know, that kind of thing. And it was very interesting how that changed the whole way. And I never would have thought that way. I would have just continued to intensely try to focus and overcome if someone hadn't taught me another way to win. And it didn't disqualify the way I already had. He always said it's you have more than one way to win. It's a both and. Don't
Yep.
get rid of a tool because you've got a new one. Just now you have more tools.
In yoga, we talk a lot about getting, a lot of the poses are not necessarily painful, but are uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So there's like this limit of they're not painful. They're just like being in a position for a prolonged period of time where it's uncomfortable. And can you stay with that discomfort? Like, can you sit with it for a period of time and kind of like learn that, like make friends with it kind of thing, whatever way that is, either find more space and where you are somehow, but not to run away from it. So not to quickly jump into another pose so you can get freedom, but or feel more at ease, but just to almost purposefully. That's why you put yourself in those situations or those poses, and so you have a chance to dance with that uncomfortableness and kind of play with it and say, okay,
I
And
think
find
yoga's
the edges of it too.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
You know, so that you know the difference. Like, where's the discomfort now becoming a signal that you're going too much? I mean, you know, a few weeks ago, you know, I'm running at altitude. I was higher than you, Bill. I started the race at 7,000 feet and went up from there.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I was really paying attention to what's me fatiguing and what's me risking, like blowing my heart up or something, or, you know, like what's the discomfort relative to the fact that I'm in a high altitude environment when I train at sea level, you know. And it was interesting, like I was thinking a lot about that, Jan, what you're saying, because it can be a tricky question to answer sometimes. And you know, and it's like you can go too far in either direction, so it's like making friends with the edges is so important.
we used to talk a lot about that in classes, when I would take classes or teach classes. It's like when you get to the point, where is that line of going too
Yeah.
far or feeling afterwards like you could have gone further and you didn't go further? And
Hmm.
so where is that line? And I think sometimes you test it and you're like, you injure yourself or you think to yourself, okay, that was a mistake. That was too far. And then
Yeah.
other times, I think what I like to call, you become the wisdom kicks in, where you learn your body and you learn the circumstances and you learn the poses and you learn all those different things. You begin to navigate it a little bit more easily. You're like, okay, this is my edge, as we call in yoga. We always say the edge. So this is the edge.
And it's a very contemporary thing. The whole edge conversation is my edge for now, as
Right.
opposed to this is my edge from now on. And the neat part of that is that if you're going to embrace transformation, like what happens on the other side as you grow and as you find out what you believed your edge used to be as being it now, you outperform that. You get this whole notion of not trying to survive the moments any longer, you know? And as Ken says, I don't think Ken was able to ride a bike like this even 3 years ago. You put a lot of time into this and a lot of energy. And where you would have said that I'm all done right now, where your body would have told you there's nothing left, I'm going to go out on a limb here and bet that your body can do a lot more than you thought you could even 3 years ago until you started getting into a rigorous campaign of doing all this.
No, yeah, and it's funny, this is not a bike, this is running. This is
Yeah.
this is like a whole new discipline now. So there's that, you know, but there's that recognition of past disciplines, like where it carries over. But then it's like anything, you've got to refine it and figure out, how this is different, and pay attention to the signals that you're getting. It's funny, in our Tiger Mind, like leadership stuff, we talk about the growth rep cycle, and the fact that there's a small window in the process of anything, whether it's physical or whatever, where you hit the reps that are going to give you growth, and it takes time to build up to them. You've got activation, acclimation reps, but then you also have to know when to stop, because it's no longer growth. It's now damaging. And most importantly, on the other side of it, there has to be a recovery window so that you can receive the benefit of the stimulation. So, and it's this never ending cycle where sometimes you shortchange, you realize I probably had more, but you can now remember that for next time. Or I now have, some kind of pain because I overdid it. I went too far. So it's really all feedback that lets you refine over time, and you get more and more dialed in, you know, even in relationships. It's like new relationships, especially if you think about it that way. Where's the strengthening potential in the way I'm communicating with this person? And where did I overstep a boundary? And what can we learn from that so that I can be respectful of it next time? Or where did I not give enough of myself, so I need to stretch a little more? It applies to anything, you know?
Yeah. And Ken, there's also a really important part of that, which is where are you predicting that you're at a boundary and not taking the
Mhm.
opportunity to challenge your notion of what your current capacities are. Because a lot
Right.
of times people get locked into this didn't work with so and so, so I don't do that anymore with other people.
Mm.
And the fact of the matter is that if you're committed to creating something on the other side of the discomfort, that you keep going until either that's created or there's an agreement to have no deal and move on to another conversation. And that's why many people have relationships that come to a full stop, and then they never, go into a room where they think that that failed relationship interaction can happen again. It's the mind predicting that I know where my boundaries are, and in some cases that keeps you safe and whole, and keeps harmony in your life, and in other cases you miss out on the good stuff. So I love
Yeah.
that you brought relationship into this, because it's not just a physical aspect. It can also have something to do with people learning in a particular type of an environment, going to school and deciding math is not for me. And unfortunately, it's like my grandson. There's a conversation about him being dyslexic and not being able to spell words. Well, we're creating a map together that has like 11 different kinds of different species of beings, like orcs and dwarves and hobbits and all the rest of that. So while we're putting this map together, we created a key, and I trained him to spell every last one of those words, which he's been working with these words for years and years. He's 10 years old. He knows all of them, but he couldn't put them in order until after we did it repetitively. And he knows all of those words now. He just learned in a little bit different manner, and other people have given up on him because he doesn't retain and get it as quickly as other people do.
It's it's interesting. It's just, you keep coming back to this kind of the way people receive things. So you can have a situation where you're pushing that relationship boundary, and there's a mechanical failure. They're having a reaction where you want to push farther, but you don't know, it's not just about you, it's about them.
Right.
So like, he's all of a sudden, you're like, you can do this, and he's having some kind of an emotional response to trauma from failing, or being told that he wasn't good enough, or being teased by a friend. He's got to process all that before he can bounce back into the cognitive process of actually trying to strengthen his understanding. So if we're not sensitive to that, we end up trying to break through a boundary when we're really talking to the wrong part of them that's not active. You see this with kids. For a lot of times, the best thing a parent can do is drop out of feeling and thinking and go into embodied and just give the kid a hug. you know, and just let them have some type of a kinetic response where they let go of trying to understand or believe what you're saying. They're hearing it, and they're even on a level understanding it, but they're not connected to it.
Yeah.
So, so it's like, so part of the boundaries isn't capability, it's finding that edge of the growth rep potential and recognizing it, where you let them touch that discomfort, but you didn't go so far that it actually sets them back. People go into the gym all the time, they overdo it, and now they can't train for 2 weeks because they're too sore or they hurt themselves. They've got to know, and a lot of times the edge is less than you think of if it's a new skill, because your body will it will go into try harder mode and not be sensitive to what you're actually capable of. So you push people too far in a relationship in a direction they haven't been stretched before, you could end up, setting them back significantly. And now you got a lot more work to do on the other side. So it's such a nuanced thing.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you're interested, I'll tell you what I did. It was completely not that. Okay. Uh, Essentially, I'm working with a 10-year-old, and these are 2 and 3 syllable words. Okay. Humans, orcs. And so what I did do, not once did I say, you can do it. Once I said, what I said was, sound it out. And then I was quiet. So he spelled it ORKSES. And I said, okay, do you think that that's how it's spelled by most people? And he said, I don't think so. And I said, how do you think most people spell it? And he said, ORCS. I said, are you sure? He said, no. And I said, think about it. Are you happy with that spelling? And he said, yeah, I like that spelling. And I said, okay, guess what? Most people would agree with you. And so then we went on to the next one, humans. And whatever it was, by the time we got to the 4th or 5th word, when I asked him, are you sure about that? You know what he told me, Ken? Yes, I am sure. So
yeah, no, that's awesome.
So while we're doing this map and we're engaging each other, I drew out the outlines of all these continents and islands and everything. He filled in all the detail of lakes and where the orcs were going to go, and we made up this thing where he put all kinds of cities in the oceans, and we're calling that Metropolis because that's where the mermaids live. And so the whole thing here, at one point he looks up to me and he says, by the time we're done, I'm going to know how to spell all these words, aren't I? And I said, well, maybe. I said, how would that be for you? He said, that would be good. So it was completely fun, changing the context of memorizing to actually feeling the change in his body, to where when he got the word, as we agreed that most people spelled it, then he said, yes, I now know that word. It was really kind of an interesting thing for me because I don't teach 10-year-olds, spelling very often. And this was
Right.
over a period of a couple of hours while we're working on the map and we're doing the key to it. And I'm very proud of what we did together. I'm very proud of it. And I'll see if I can get him to bring it down here so we can show you what the picture looks like now. But I think the whole idea is, there's no need to convince somebody, but if you recognize at the beginning that if they're not getting it, more often than not, they're not thinking about the word. They're thinking about, as you said before, Ken. So the whole idea is to get them to focus on the here and now. If you were going to write this word, what would that word be spelled like? That's good. That's good. And now can you give me an alternative way to spell it? Yeah, okay, that's pretty good too. So it's just a series of questions to kind of tease out the focus and the being present in the moment so that they can actually create, or he could actually create. I've got an experience of one time, guys, which I
Well,
very much
and
appreciate.
the interesting thing about it, that I would be curious, I don't have an answer to this, but how much of his receptiveness to that was basically the work that you had done to build a trusting relationship that lowered some of his natural boundaries that may have manifested if he had been put together with a new tutor, who tried the same, like how much of that
That's key, Ken.
doing
That
it that way,
relationship is everything. I agree with you.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just really interesting. I think this is where it's funny. Actually, I work with someone who she works with dyslexic kids, and she studied the Orton Gillingham method and got certified in that, and started kind of a business. And each one is different, and a lot of it is that's first. They need to know that she's safe. She's safe to work with. Like they can't even talk about words because like if you ask them those questions, they would freak out. Some of them would physically get kind of aggressive because of the relationship they've had with something very challenging with people who it didn't really break their trust, but where they weren't able to nurture trust, to where they felt they had an advocate. So she would have to do the work that, you probably did in advance to create those kind of results. So it's just so interesting how layered it is. You know,
Well, we went through a period of time, and you know what, Ken? Relationship is a funny thing. When you create a relationship to a particular level and then you're not around for a year and a half, it's starting over. You have
yeah, yeah.
you have to refill the cup. And so there's that whole process. And at the beginning, he would say things like, I can't, and I don't know how. And I would say, well, okay, that's fine. That's fine. And so if you did know how would this go? And I was very careful in everything that I did to always use a positive sentence as opposed to,
Mhm.
no, that's not it, you know? So I wanted his
Yeah.
focus to be on being proud of what he just did and now having the strength to go out and keep creating to the next level and then try some other things. But in some cases, we came up with 4 or 5 different ways to spell mermaids, which these days, who's to say it's not valid? There are college professors who are saying, forget spelling, it's not important. Now, you and I know it's the code that gets you through life because other people do have some particular ways they'd like to have words spelled, but it was refreshing. And while you're talking amongst yourselves, I'm going to go see if I can get this map so that I can puff my chest out and show you what we created together. Be right back.
Cool. I think one of the key words today was edge, right?
Yeah.
I like because actually, Jan, taking yoga was where I first learned to be in an uncomfortable pose and just take a moment and breathe into where I was feeling the discomfort and actually relax into the pose. And
Mhm.
then you can apply that to other types of exercise. And then when you get beyond a point or hold it longer or whatever that exercise is asking of you, it's like a little reward because you did it, and I like that process. I think always, do and accomplish and reward or acknowledge that accomplishment. Because I do wall Pilates now,
Mhm.
and I can't do a lot of rolls, roll over, especially roll with your feet over your head. But just sitting up and rolling up sometimes is a good process for me, and I can do it further and further each time, which is nice to acknowledge and feel. Yeah, it's just something about going to the edge, like you guys say.
It was interesting today. I had a private client, and so yoga client, and so we took a pose, which is one of my favorite things to do, and actually, pretty basic pose, downward dog, which is like, and we broke it down and broke it down and broke it down. And it got to the point where I was trying to explain something to her and I could see she wasn't getting it. So I actually took a picture of it, her in it.
Oh
And
yeah.
then I asked her to alter it. I told her to make adjustments. And then I snapped another photo of her and I showed it to her so she could visually see the difference. Because in
Mm,
yoga, we don't practice with mirrors. So it's really about body awareness, knowing where your body is in space compared to, dancing where, you practice in front of a mirror all the time, or in a gym a lot of times they have mirrors. So it's really teaching you that body awareness, and that is really hard for people to learn when we're not accustomed to it and when they haven't been trained that way. So thank you. Yeah, the edge.
the edge.
So
Did
I'll
you find
take a
a map?
moment, if that's okay, and I will show you.
Wow.
Lincoln was saying that he had an assignment to create a map over the summer, and there would be goodies once he got back to school from his teacher. And so this is the one that he did before we went away to the family reunion. And then when we got to the family reunion, he invited me to take, and this is drawn by dumping Rice Krispies on here, making some shapes, and then drawing a line around the outside of it. So then when we got there, he asked me if I would draw some
Wow.
pieces to a map. And so I did very intricate, drawing, and I've got some art background. So I, did a lot of inlets and stuff like that. And they were just big gaping continents. He took all the rest of it and put in all of the lakes and all the buildings, and you see all the ones that are in the blue. Those are metropolis homes where the mermaids live. Okay, and so we also created this key to all of the beings that are in our world, and we worked out how the words were spelled before he wrote them. And at the end of all of it, he did all the coloring, he did all of the maps, he did everything. All I did was give him a context, in terms of the line drawing, and he did all the rest.
Cool.
And we both signed it. You probably, I don't know if you can see this or not, but down in that left-hand corner, BC and LE.
Yep.
So it's a co-creation. And I think we both learned a lot from that. I know I did.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we were talking about, being present and mindful. We always seem to get back to that, don't we?
Often. Yeah.
I'm not interested in other people's diagnosis of what his limits are.
Mm.
We'll just see where that goes. And I don't know who I have to be or who I have to become, to really give him the additional charge that he's not getting from all the other people that are supporting and loving him. There's nothing missing, from that side. It's just a little bit different. It's a little bit different. And Ken, you nailed it. It's a special relationship. So we're all still here? Pardon me?
I have to hop. I have to go.
Oh, you do? Okay. All right. We're going to wrap up here too. And thank you for indulging me. I love doing stuff like this, going out and having a great life and coming back and reporting on it.
Here we go.
All right, folks. It is just about to the top of the hour. Anybody else have any other thoughts or anything you want to bring into the conversation?
Play with the edge. We determined that was one of the big words of the day. So
play with the edge. I love it. Yeah. And don't let decisions that you've made about where that actually is today stop you from testing it. Mm-hmm. Give it a shot. Give it a shot. Anything else, Ken?
Nope, I'm good. It's a good conversation as always.
Absolutely. And so I just want to invite all of you, our listeners at home, as I do every week when we finish, please reach out to somebody, either text or call or email, and let them know that your world is better because they're out there and they're in it, and that they will always have a friend in you if they don't feel it anywhere else. So with that said, we are lighting the candle, a world that works. We're going to wish you a good day.
Have a good week.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, part of the Xvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us each week, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.